Hello world, we're looking at this pile of rubbish today, which is found within Subterraneus, both a point-and-click game available on Steam for 64-bit Windows PCs, more on that later, and provider of some horrific Google image results. Seriously, don't look that up if you hate insects. While we're at it, skip this video if you don't like cartoonish representations of trash piles, point-and-click games, or the sound of my voice, because really I've got nothing else for you. But if you're still here, I'll get started with my usual half-sarcastic description of the game's premise. We begin our story by falling down a hole. For a while. Yep. See, a young man named Clodimir was taking his rubbish to the dump when he fell into the big asshole he was trying to populate with his household waste. Saved only by the fact he landed on a discarded mattress and somehow didn't get tetanus from an exposed spring or something, he finds himself in a strange underground cave system. He now has but one goal: return to the surface. Specifically, return to the surface before the snail races start. Although surely he could arrive like half an hour late and miss exactly zero progress. There's a little more to this story regarding an overpopulated planet with limited resources, outweighed by a 100% efficient recycling system that can reuse those resources indefinitely. But all that information is in the Steam description rather than in the game, and thus doesn't impact your experience very much. In fact, there's one line that implies that they just chuck it all down a big hole. So it's all about this labyrinthine set of caverns and almost medieval society that dwells within them. Yep, there's people down here and they're somehow not all dead. Well, some of them are dead. The socially accepted amount of people are dead. By the look of this graveyard, there's actually been people down here for some time. As a device to get the character into these caverns in the first place, you might ask why they'd go with a sort of future man gets trapped in a secret medieval society plot for this. And honestly, I find myself asking, why not? It's as good a reason as any for your fish out of water protagonist to have the entire surrounding area explained to him. Thankfully, the game doesn't take itself seriously enough for that to be a problem. For example, here's the protagonist telling the developer to remove a barrier. That's not a puzzle you have to work out, it just sort of happens for a bit of fun. I'll dive into the options before describing the gameplay. There's English and French language available, which even appears to extend to things like in-game signs. Nice wee extra touch there. And I can't recall the last time I saw a point-and-click game with a luminosity slider, for whatever that's worth. There's two more options I want to touch on which aren't on this screen. They appear when you start a new game, although you can also change them at any time during your playthrough. The first one is automatic and manual text skipping. Simple enough, click through all the dialogues manually or have them move on after a certain amount of time. You can still skip individual lines in automatic mode. The more interesting of the two options to me is the quote-unquote difficulty setting. Not only will the easier difficulty option give you a hint button, but it also reduces the number of verbs you can use. In the harder difficulty you're given look, pick up, use and talk verbs. The easier difficulty combines those last three into one, giving you look and whichever verb is relevant to what you clicked on. Being the pretentious wanker I am, I opted for the all verbs difficulty, so I'll be talking about the game from that perspective. Really appreciate the option being there though. But on the subject of hints and verbs, that brings me to some negatives, or at least some odd design decisions. We'll start with hints. If you choose the very many verbs difficulty, you won't have that handy hint button. However, what you will have is a character who is an insatiable reader. Whenever you ask her what she's reading, it's always about something that closely matches your current predicament, whatever that may be. That's your slightly vaguer hint system, and whilst it functions in that role, you still need to go and seek that person out first. There's a number of ways that games have implemented hint systems, from the aforementioned dirty grey hint button to the character keeping a journal. What those examples have in common is that you can access them at all times. You don't have to wander through multiple screens, lose your place, or, as can happen in this game, find your way out of a maze first. Regular viewers might be wondering why I'm not pissing myself with rage at this point, and that's because the maze in question has a trick to it. You're not expected to waste your time solving the maze, you're expected to solve the puzzle that then happens to let you navigate the maze. Entirely different. And once you get where you're going, you get both a map and a shortcut that opens up. Pretty inoffensive as far as mazes go. Now the verbs. Either difficulty will present you with a coin interface, and a perfectly functional one at that. An elegant interface even, with the 16 inventory slots situated around the verbs. Click a hotspot, you get your verbs and items in one place. From there, you can click on whatever verb you wish to perform or item you want to use. If you click on Clodimir himself, clicking an item will then provide you with a description. It's quite neat and tidy that way. Doesn't give you a way to combine items though, does it? Problem is, you do need to combine items at some points, which is why the game provides you with this crafting table. Insert obvious joke about all games must have crafting element here. It's fine in implementation, it'll quickly indicate which combinations work and which ones don't, but it brings us to the same problem as the hint lady. You need to actually go to the combination contraption first. It's almost like there's a bizarre need to keep as many things in universe as possible, a strange fear that anything done in an interface, any reminder that you are in fact playing a game, will break the immersion. What I actually suspect is that the designer fell in love with the coin interface and couldn't bear to change it. It's a nice interface though. There's one area where I will give the game a pass though. You can activate a hotspot indicator with the right mouse button, and this, like many other things, is done slightly differently. This will only highlight hotspots within a certain radius, forcing you to sweep across the screen in order to find everything. Normally I'd find this quite tedious, and the reason I don't is quite likely due to the sheer number of clickable things the game throws at you. Over 500 if the Steam description is to be believed. Most of them useless or only present to provide flavour, but they're nonetheless. Various tools, decoration, and every type of mushroom you could possibly hope for. In that situation, concentrating your focus on a portion of the screen makes more sense than rendering 50 odd exclamation marks and expecting the player to remember where they all are. Or they could just cut the number of objects down, I suppose. Whilst it is really solving the wrong problem, I just can't bring myself to be mad about that for some reason. And so we come to what is possibly the most baffling design decision of the lot. The game is 64-bit only. For a game which is merely moving sprites around, I can't see the performance enhancements of a 64-bit version being all that necessary. This might make more sense for a Mac release, since Apple are actually looking to phase out 32-bit app support at some point, but as I said earlier, the game is only available for Windows, which still supports 32-bit programs no problem as long as they don't use anything below DirectX 9, and even then it's iffy. If I can indulge in some more conjecture, I wonder if they had set that option when they first created their project in Unity and couldn't change it later. Double check what you're running on your machine before you buy is what I'm saying. One final point for the obligatory nitpick. If I want to talk to this lady in this room, I have to wait for this long animation to finish first. Why? Why so long? Apart from that, the puzzles work quite well. A lot of figuring things out as opposed to rubbing items together or hunting down the right person. Although there is a pretty blatant round-robin fetch quest at one point. Thankfully you can double-click to warp through exits, so it's brief enough that it might have been put in there purely as a joke. The game's not above breaking the fourth wall after all. What we have here is a game which is perfectly enjoyable if you don't do what I'm doing and think about it way too much. The developer stated their intention to make an old-school point-and-click 2D adventure game inspired by the greatest licenses, and I feel like they succeeded. That statement alone doesn't mean the game's worth playing, of course, I'll get to that. They also stated, funny humour not included, to which I would respond, it's okay, light-hearted, nothing cringy, nothing laugh out loud either. As for the claim of a whole lot of more or less obscure references, well, some of those references are more blatant than others. And yes, if you recognise where this is lifted from, that head does exactly what you think it does. Anyway, for a game with no voice acting but a nice subtle soundtrack and something like a 3-hour running time, the £10.29 price tag is toward the high end of what I think you could ask. Still, it was interesting enough to make a longer than average episode, certainly word-wise, and it kept me playing through it for around 3 hours, so I'm not really going to complain. Hello, thanks for watching to the end. If you're so inclined to leave a comment, a like, a dislike, whatever you fancy, please do. Or if you really like what I'm doing here, I do have a Patreon if you want to contribute money. Links in the description. Thanks again and cheerio.